Hi, I'm Captain Mike, and in this video we're going to try to answer the question about glazing greenware before you fire it to bisque. And we have these two little frogs here. This little frog has not been fired. It's out of the mold, it's a slip cast piece, and it is fully dried, but it has not been fired to bisque. This one has been fired to bisque. They are the same mold, of course, as you can see, and the only difference is this one is still clay. If you put it in water, it would just dissolve. It would fall right back into a big lump of clay, and that was it. This one will not. This one would, if you put it in water, it would retain its shape, and it would soak up a lot of water. Now, the reason that you usually bisque to 04, cone 04 first is it leaves the piece not fully vitrified. It's still porous enough to accept the glaze in its liquid state, and it will adhere to the bisque piece properly. This one, if you're not really careful as you apply a liquid glaze, it might start to deteriorate. I've never done this before. I understand it can be done, so this is not any sort of revelation. We're just going to see what happens together. So let me go, and I'm going to glaze these, and we're going to use some Dunkin' Crystal Glazes, CR903. I've used this before. It'll look something like this. It's a crystal glaze. And I'll apply it with one of these two brushes depending. This one is stiffer right here. This one is. This one is softer. I may have to use this one. We'll see. It's not really important, but I'll tell you which one I use on what and the whole process when I get back. And I'll show them to you before I fire them, after the glaze is applied. Then I will fire them, and then we'll compare the results from there. So y'all just kind of hang in there. I'll be right back. Yesterday I put 3 coats of this Dunkin' Crystals 06, cone 06 glaze on these 2 froggies, and I let them dry overnight. And as you can hardly see the difference. This one's a little different color than this one, and the reason is, I think, for some reason, this is lighter, but it has about 50% moisture in it. I checked that using my my handy dandy little moisture meter here. It's not intended for ceramics, but it does tell you that there's moisture in one and not in the other. This is the greenware. This is the bisque. So I let them dry overnight, and I'm going to let them dry a little longer because I want this one to be drier than 50% moisture content showing on my meter. And I did not have to use the blue brush. I used this brush, and it worked out just great. This is my preferred brush, so that came out really good. Now, a point to make is that if you are using high fire clay and you have your glaze in buckets, dipping them would be acceptable, probably preferable to painting them on with a brush, because one dip and it's over with. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have 06 glazes in a bucket, then you can dip them with 06 too. But just remember that if you're using a low fire clay, use a low fire glaze. Now, you can use a high fire clay and a low fire glaze, and as long as you fire it no higher than, say, 04, somewhere around there, or 06, which this is recommended to, then you do okay. Now, I'm going to fire both of my little froggies to 04 because this one has not been bisqued. I don't know if it'll change the color of this or not. It really will not matter because this has already been fired to 04, and this has not been fired at all. Now, the difference between 04, which is the bisque temperature, and 06, which is the glaze maturing temperature, is only about 116 degrees Fahrenheit. But you'd be surprised on some glazes that does make a difference. Actually, on some clays that'll make a difference whether they start to slump and deform. So we're going to stick to 04, no higher than 04. So I'm going to let these sit probably all day, and probably tomorrow, maybe since afternoon or tonight, I'll put them in the kiln if it dries out a little better, and then I'll come back tomorrow morning and we will see how this little project turns out. So say good night to my froggies, and we'll see you when they come out of the kiln. Okay, here are the results after firing these two pieces. One that was greenware and glazed, and one that had been bisqued and glazed. I fired them both to cone 04, mainly because I had a bunch of other ware in the kiln that needed to be bisqued to cone 04. Now, I know you're not supposed to put glazed ware and bisque ware at the same time, but in this case, it did not make any difference except for one thing, and that was the rise in temperature of about 116 degrees. Now, you'd think that 116 degrees wouldn't make a lot of difference, but with glazes, a lot of times it does. As you can see here, this is the piece that I used for reference. It was fired to 06. And the crystal pieces, you know, in it are obvious. They're a light blue and they contrast against the green. They did not really show up on these. The glaze actually got a little hot and started to run. You can still see some of where the glaze was. You can see where it run off the hottest parts of the piece and kind of started down. On the piece that was green, if you will call it that, greenware, it actually puddled up on the bottom. It ran more. And these pieces were right next to each other on the same level in the kiln. So it reacted a little differently, but it still looks pretty much like this one, which was what you would normally, you know, fire as bisque ware. So the question is, do you want to add glaze to your greenware before you fire it, and you know, before you bisque it, and you know, save a step? Now that's up to you. I'd experiment with it on some certain pieces just to see how it turned out for you. But do it, you know, fire it where your glazes are recommended. In other words, this was cone 06. You'll get the best effect. The hotter the glaze, the more it's going to run, and that might not be what you want. It could mess up a kiln shell. So with that said, the question is, can you glaze greenware and fire it? Answer is yes. And you could probably get acceptable results if you didn't fire at 116 degrees higher than it was supposed to be. But in this case, it worked anyhow. So that's my video on comparing bisqued and glazed piece to a greenware and glazed piece, and both fired. Now, the only thing that's left to do is for a really beautiful princess to come kiss one of these froggies and turn him into a handsome prince. You guys know anybody? Send them my way. I'm Captain Mike. That's my video, and I'm out of here.